Let's do it. Welcome to the straight
red card.
Not a lead card, but a red one. A lead card would be heavy. Maybe, depending on how thin it was pressed. Yeah, exactly. If it were pressed really thin, it wouldn't really be that heavy. Lead's not that heavy.
It'd be heavier than a red card, though.
Yeah, you would think, because cards are usually made out of
unless the red card is
plastic.
Made out of lead.
What are cards made out of these days? Are red cards like plastic now?
Some version of plastic. I'm sure.
I got my new job
fiberglass
cards, and they're hear that? They're plastic.
That, yes. Yeah.
That's so weird. They're not paper anymore. Okay, so remember when you were talking about your neighbors and the drugs?
Yes.
So it's so funny because when this is probably 99, 98, I was living in a house, just me. I'd thrown my
good place to live.
Yes, and and so I knew I had these neighbors behind me, and they lived in this little cottage on the same lot, but they had somehow demarcated the lots, so they were two lots, but the person that owned both lots was the same person, so I was renting at the time, and this little cottage in the back, I hadn't seen any life. Like, there were people living there, but I hadn't seen any life, like anybody come outside of the building for weeks on end. And then I woke up one morning and I'm in the kitchen. I hear the screaming and yelling, and I go out, look out the back door, and it's, the guy who owns my house, and he's renting to me, and renting to this cottage guy. And he's like, holy fucking shit, this is the worst thing I've fucking ever seen in my life. He's just screaming out loud. Apparently they turned that house into a meth lab. And there was like a foot of garbage in the whole house, across the floors, everywhere. Like, the dude,
when you're on meth, you never know. That's a drug I've never understood. How is that a sell? How do you go,
I know,
dude, fucking take this shit. Look what happens to you. Oh, don't look what happens to you. Just take it. Seriously, just take it.
Dude, it'll rot your teeth out, but take it. Like, you'll completely become a zombie. Take this drug. At least there's like some residual sort of artistic benefits from taking heroin. And I'm not saying take heroin. I'm not saying that. I mean, but I've known
drink excessively.
I've known a lot of artists who did opium, and they smoked the weed and all that stuff, and it helped them become creative. But I'm not saying you should don't do heroin. Don't do that. Wow. Okay. That's bad, because you will get addicted in
drugs are bad.
I have had two friends who are musicians who have died from heroin overdoses. Not lately. They died in their 30s, and that's sad. That's 20 years ago. So don't do that drug. That's a really bad drug. Don't do drugs.
Drugs are bad.
Okay. All right. So this is a segment where we take on your questions, which are always interesting. And Chambers, yeah, sometimes they're weird. Chambers WI says, here's a question. He says,
really?
Here's a question. He says,
is there a question mark at the end of it?
No, he said, just demonstrably. Here's a question. How do you feel MLS as a whole has embraced the need to upgrade the youth systems? Obviously, a long way to go, but it does seem like teams like RSL, Seattle, Chicago, Colorado are taking the right steps to get to where Dallas and Philly seem to be. And what teams do you think have been most resistant to youth development?
I really like the fact that he had Chicago in there, man. It makes me warm in the heart.
Yeah, well, hasn't really worked out though.
Chicago's had some homegrowns that have succeeded, but they've signed a lot of homegrowns. So some don't pan out.
Mihailovic went off to Montreal.
Well, and he's done great there. Look at that.
I know
he get away from the Chicago senior team. Who knew?
Slonina's still there. So
the Reynolds brothers. You got
I don't know who they are.
You got everybody. I mean,
Gutierrez, I know. Yeah. Okay.
So there's a number of Chicago homegrowns that are still within the organization. There's some that haven't even featured for the first team, which and we're not going to talk about this right now because we're going to talk about this in more in depth later. But the whole MLS Next Pro, league, I guess you could call it.
Mm-hmm.
That will be the area where they can start to get some playing time and develop, and you're not just shipping. So Chicago's one of those interesting, well, I say interesting clubs, it's the most frustrating club where they didn't have an MLS 2 team. So you have some teams who had MLS 2 teams that were like in USL. Chicago didn't have that. And they just shipped off 5 or 6 of their academy signed players to Tulsa or wherever and let them develop there. But that's not having a hands-on development, and that always frustrated the fuck out of me. How much money could it possibly cost to run a team in USL?
Yeah, a 2 team.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not aiming, if you're signing them for pennies because they're just out of the academy, they're not like 28-year-olds who are looking to survive. But if you're signing them for pennies, I mean, I don't understand it.
So here's the thing. My criticism of certain MLS teams is that they got started too slowly, but that's some of them. It's not their fault. They just became MLS teams. But for Chicago to not have a 2 team,
dude, that kills me. That's my biggest pet peeve.
Ridiculous.
I could accept the shitty performances we've experienced over the last decade if they had an MLS 2 team that was actually developing players from the grassroots.
Dude, it's just dumb.
It's beyond dumb. And you're talking about a major city with a large population of varying degrees. So like there's a large Mexican population, there's a large Polish population. There's just a number of people that are playing the sport that they are not taking advantage of. They're taking advantage at the younger levels, but then there's a huge gap between academy to professional that's just not being served.
So in the East, the teams that tend to have been neglectful so far, I'm not saying they're neglectful this minute, because
England,
they might have no, with their youth teams, is because they're fairly new teams. So FC Cincinnati, you're not going to see a lot of their youth players yet coming up through the system. They're a fairly new team.
Does New England have anybody really coming up? New England?
Not really, but
they've never really focused on that either.
They brought up Kessler.
Very, very, very Chicago-esque, if you will, when it comes to that.
Yeah, Kessler's more of a college development player. But yeah, New England does some, not a lot. You got DeJuan Jones. You do have some players on New England who are youngsters. I don't think they're the problem. FC Cincinnati, you're just not going to see a lot of it. Columbus Crew, I don't know. I mean, they don't develop a lot of youth players. Inter Miami, they're new. So no, they're not going to yet. Montreal do the Canadian players. And then you've got, I think that New York City and Red Bull and Orlando are doing fairly decently. Philadelphia as well. Toronto, again, more development of Canadian players, not American players.
Well, I mean, players in Toronto, not necessarily, they don't have to be Canadians, just like the various number of players that are born and raised and develop in the United States aren't necessarily American players.
Well, all I'm saying is I'm not an expert on any of these teams individually and their development.
Sure.
But I kind of get a sense seeing the starting lineup week after week, who's playing young players and who's not. So I can tell you that they developed. So that's not going to happen with Inter Miami yet, or Cincinnati or Nashville for the most part.
Well, I'm bouncing back to New England in that sense. But how many players on the New England side did they actually develop?
Well, that's a good question. And it depends on what you mean by develop. Like,
I imagine from the academy up. Let's just go from there.
I
feel like that's the whole spark of this question.
Well, I think what happens in a lot of cases, I mean, they do have an academy. You know that, right?
Sure. Everybody, for the most part, pretty much.
Not everybody.
I said for the most part.
Yeah, not everybody.
For the most part, most MLS teams have an academy, of course. Right. But obviously the whole point of MLS Next Pro is that it's that gap between academy and playing for the first team. Now, there are going to be some players, I'll use the Aronson brothers as an example, that just kind of make the bounce from academy to first team and do well. But then there are a large number of players that get signed and then just sort of languish in USL and never really crack the first team ever. And it's
okay.
That's the whole point of that. So
Okay.
I feel like MLS is taking steps in the right direction, and I'm not going to go into too much depth into that aspect, but I think there are definitely some teams that are more far advanced than other teams.
I think that, it depends. Like, you look at Henry Kessler in New England and you're like, well, that guy's 23 and he played for the Virginia Cavaliers for 1 year in college. So yeah, did they really develop him? Not really. I mean, he is he's a player they signed on a GA, but he's not really, which is Generation Adidas contract, but he's not really developed.
No, so that means they had absolutely nothing to do with him. He was a freshman in college basically, and they signed him to a GA contract.
I mean, the same thing goes for Justin Rennicks. He's 22. He's playing a lot for them, I think he played like 8 or 9, 7 games this season for them. And he is 22, but he also played for IU for 1 year. And so he's not really necessarily developed.
I would say GA contracts do not count as development, because most likely if you're signing somebody to a GA contract, that's somebody going through the draft. Whereas if you're actually developing the player, sort of like I said, Gutierrez or even a Slonina to that extent, you're signing them as a youth academy player and you're developing them up until they become a first team player.
Well, I don't know how this works, but he's a homegrown player.
Who is?
Justin Rennicks. He's a homegrown player for them. So I think
GA then at the point
is Boston. No, GA was for Kessler. He's Generation Adidas. Rennicks is homegrown.
Sure. Okay. Then there you go. There's a homegrown example. Okay. Great.
And they have another one who doesn't play that much at all. Damian Rivera, who's a homegrown player. So that's the East.
We're using one team as an example here, guys. So just if you're coming at us saying, hey, why are you so focused on New England? You just brought them up randomly.
We just
randomly.
We just want to use one as an example, because it's really, unless you're FC Dallas or you're one of those teams that's been focusing on this for a long time, a lot of your youth players are actually in their 20s, young 20s, and they're, homegrown players or their Generation Adidas. So
playing USL most likely.
Right. And then we go to it's the same thing. The newer teams are just not going to have an academy system that's had any time to develop and grow, like Austin FC in the West. FC Dallas, of course, the shining star. Colorado Rapids are doing great. Houston doesn't do that much. I mean, prove me wrong. SKC has, I think, a pretty good system. They've been sending players like Busio over to Italy. LA Galaxy. LA Galaxy's prolific. Los Angeles is getting their game going. Minnesota, not so much. Yeah. But, they got Gasper and some of those other young guys. But again, that's more of they went to college for a year and then came and played for us. Portland Timbers. Yeah, no one on the Ibovasi. I'm trying to think of any really great players that have come out of their youth system, and Ibovasi is just about all I can think of.
So I guess ultimately, when it comes to this question, there are definitely teams that are well beyond most other teams.
Yeah.
And there are definitely leaders of the pack. I feel like most MLS teams are definitely making strides moving forward. Obviously the homegrown contracts benefit them, having them on the roster compared to signing random players. Obviously players that don't count towards the cap, etc.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's definitely teams that are doing better than other teams, and those are well known and documented.
And frankly,
I feel like there are some teams that are coming through the woodwork and doing better.
If you're not starting an academy at this point as an MLS team because it's required, and you haven't really put your full ball sack into it and said, I'm all in, you're really falling behind.
And that's the thing. I feel like every team has an academy team at this point, and I feel like the vast majority of them are free for the most part.
It's required, actually.
Yeah. So That's all occurring. The big key is obviously bringing them from the academy level to the first team, and I think that's ideally the goal for the MLS Next Pro, which again we'll talk about at a later date.
Yes.
But that's the whole point of that is that you're going to be basically transitioning from the academy team. You're going to bring these players over. They're going to be performing here, and then they're going to be working their way into the first team at that point.
What was the name of that?
MLS Next
Pro. And it's hard to believe they stayed up all night to come up with that fucking name for the league. Next Pro.
Put all those heads together and beat together that creative sense, you know?
I mean, I guess they couldn't use League One. That's already been used by USL. USL took up all the championship, USL 1, USL or League One, League 2, so they couldn't use any of those.
I hate really diving into this because this is a whole topic on its own right. But I mean, the big thing is that they're not necessarily focusing on the quality of the league, if you will. Their focus the focus of Next Pro is really going to be the development of players, and so I mean it's going to be different.
Yeah, but it's different
from it is a third division league, but it's also going to be different from ISA.
It's going to be boys versus boys instead. We've
had this topic already.
I know, but instead,
and I agree with you.
MLS 2 teams used to play against grown men in USL.
Mm-hmm.
Grown men who have experience too.
Yeah.
And it really tested them. Now it's going to be boys against boys. That's not good.
And everything I've read about it is that's the biggest downplay is that it used to be men versus boys.
Yes.
And those boys got a lot of experience, a lot of development because they're playing against some big boys here.
But let me just say this. It wasn't MLS's decision on their own. USL was kind of they were sick of MLS, and they wanted money because they're requiring, I think you mentioned $10 million as an entry fee.
It's a new expansion fee.
And from behind the scenes, what I was told was that they were going to ask the USL or 2 teams from MLS to pay $5 million, not the full 10, but at least 5.
Which to expand on that, the MLS 2 teams never paid any expansion fee.
No,
they were part of the development, and they definitely added to the stability of USL. And USL has a lot to thank MLS for that factor. But they're at a point now where they're bringing in new investors, they're bringing in new teams, and they're looking at it saying like, well, these 13 teams or so, give or take, didn't pay a penny, so let's try to get that money from them.
Right. So they were looking for $5 million to $7 million, I believe, is what I heard, for them to stay in the league, and it was a game of chicken. And MLS said, "Well, fuck it, we don't need you then.
Yeah,
we'll just make our own league."
Yeah, basically what they said.
I mean, for $7 million, $5 million a pop, we can run our own fucking 2 league. We don't need you. Mm-hmm. But it is sad. It is sad.
Well, I mean, they're going to acquire the exact same expenses that they've experienced in USL, but they don't have to pay that payment. So, quite frankly, financially speaking, if this is accurate, again, we're going off of what the rumors.
This is rumors.
So it's not 100% accurate, and we're not saying this is exactly what went down. So don't.
But this is
crucify us for this. But
it's a reliable source. I'll just say that.
But but to their point is, all the expenses are going to be the same. They're still going to be traveling to certain areas, certain amount of times. They're still going to be paying contracts to the players, a certain number of contracts, and we'll go over that later. Yep. But in the end, it's they don't have to worry about paying that $5 to $7 million, because why would they? At that point, they've got 27, 29 teams coming up in the next 2 years here, or next year or two.
Yep.
So at that point, why would they say, "Hey guys, pony up that $5 to $7 million towards this league"? Or why don't they just come out and say, "Hey, we're going to start our own shit"?
Basically, for the MLS 2 teams to stay in collectively, it would have cost them almost $70 million, and they just said, "Fuck you.
We'll keep that, buddy.
We'll start our own league, buddy. All right, for $70 million, we can afford to start our own league."
Yeah.
All right. Next question. Is it mathematically possible for the United States men's national team to be put into the first seed pot for Qatar 2022 based on the FIFA ranking, assuming USA beats all teams for the rest of qualifying. Every point counts during, including the Bosnia and Herzegovina friendly. He's right. It does count. And so that's the question. What's your guys' opinion on U.S. men's national team getting into pot 1 seed along with Belgium, Brazil, France, etc.? It's possible. It's mathematically totally possible. Because we're ranked 12th right now, and we got 2 teams in front of us, Portugal and Italy, one of which won't be ahead of us in the pot,
or so both.
Already gets us to 11. So it's 10, very gets possible.
Us to 10. 11 or 10.
I did some number crunching, and it's really difficult to interpret how FIFA rankings work, and you got to really get into fiddly fucking around with a lot of math. But is it possible? Absolutely yes. Is it probable? No.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I don't think
definitely even assuming that both Italy and Portugal flame out before the final match, they don't qualify.
Not going to happen. Yeah. One of them's making it.
One of them will, yeah. But assuming that it happens, that's still requiring a lot of results going our way. Outside of us just winning, it requires a number of other teams failing moving forward into the World Cup. And at this point, they're going to be doing once everybody starts qualifying, of course, they're going to be doing the polls anyways. So it's not like we're like, by Christmas of 2022, when the World Cup starts, we have to be at this point. No, we have to be at that point 6 months prior,
Now, if there was still a, tournament, a pre-tournament, what was that called?
Confederations Cup?
Yes. If there was still a Confederations Cup, and we went in and we beat Brazil, Germany, and France, yes, we're going to do that. But there is no such thing happening now. So we're going to beat Mexico. If we beat Mexico again, they're still ranked behind us. So though doesn't really help us as much as far as increasing our point percentage or number of points we have. It will help us, but it won't help us as much as, say, beating a France or beating an England or beating Germany or whatever. That would launch us.
Because, those teams would drop the points, whereas we gain the points. So, it makes a massive difference there.
But is it possible? Absolutely possible.
It's not probable.
Probable?
Like you said.
Yeah, not probably. I give it like a 25% chance of happening that we are in the 8. One.
And going back into history, looking back at 2006, we were ranked 5th at one point going into the 2006 World Cup. Now, mind you, we weren't 5th when they pulled the World Cup list by any means. So, it's just that we were at that point. That doesn't really necessarily benefit us. It does and it doesn't.
It doesn't. The problem is who ends up in pot 2. You look at some of the teams.
Well, you're displacing those teams from the ranked teams.
But you look at
you're displacing them into pot 2. So
look at pot 2, though. The potential of who could be in pot 2. They're not going to be shitty teams, so it's not really that big of a benefit.
Well, let's throw in the randomness that we happen to get into whatever the top 7 teams. And maybe France gets, let's just use France as an example because this is hypothetical. But let's say France gets moved down and they're now in pot 2. All it does is mean that pot 2 is a little more deeper as far as quality is concerned. And it doesn't matter. You're still going to have to face that whether you're in top pot 2 because you're still going to have to deal with a list of pot A, So
listen, if I have my choice, even if we're in pot 2 and let's say it's France, United States, Korea, and Algeria, okay, that's fine. We'll probably lose to France and beat Algeria and Korea. All right.
Yeah, we tied France last time we played them. I don't know.
The good news is we're probably going to be in pot 2, and that's good news. So being in pot 1 and pot 2 means that those last 2 teams are going to be kind of low tier. Like if you're coming out of pot 3 and 4.
Yeah, what that really means is that we have one big boy and then we're gonna have 2 below us.
Correct. And
obviously,
even if we get into pot 1, we're probably going to get a big boy out of pot 2.
We'll make
and then we're going to have 2 teams that are kind of lesser than.
Because I mean, you using an example. What if we get it first? I mean, obviously, it'd be. There's a difference between us getting, say, like a Croatia versus a France, of course. But I mean, Croatia's still going to be big. Using them as an example,
Yep.
So, but it is what it is. Our big concern really is focusing on pot 3 and pot 4 at that point, and we should be able to handle those pot 3 and pot 4. Just what happens in the World Cup is very specific to that time frame. Anybody can win. Anybody can beat anybody at any given moment.
All that talk about pot reminded me. I better. I had to refresh there. All right, we got one more question. Maybe we have 2 more. Jesus Christ! For the next segment, says Breg Gerhalter. In your opinion, what is the biggest U.S. men's national team scandal or controversy we've had? Yeah, we've already talked about this, but I guess I better just do it one more time. Listen, we were involved in part of that scandal. I mean, later on. But that is when we found out that John Harkes had stooped Winalda's other. And I want to involve you in this, Brett. Obviously, I was on the writing crew, and we wrote a skit where we interviewed a fake Ralph Sampson. Not Ralph. Did I say Ralph Sampson? He's a great basketball player. Steve Sampson. And, we had a fake interview with a dog, a cartoon dog. And that didn't go over really well with certain people. And certain people wrote me a certain email and sent me certain messages and said, I hate you and you're not my friend anymore. And we hope that certain press person doesn't hate us anymore. But it was a joke. It was a comedy skit. And it was the day after the whole scandal came out. And it's still on YouTube somewhere, but I'm not going to post it.
Let's put it this way. There was definitely comedic value behind it, and it wasn't meant to be taken serious. I understand their take on it.
Who's there?
Because Eric's.
Oh, the person we're not naming.
I just did. Whatever. It's not. I mean, we basically talked about the topic, so it doesn't really matter one way.
I hope Eric does not hold this over our heads forever. I mean, it was not.
We're still big fans, buddy.
Yeah, it was meant to be funny. I thought it was pretty funny. A lot of people thought it was very funny. So
obviously, the problem is that's close. It's obviously close to home.
It's real close to home.
It's at home.
Yeah,
I understand that issue, but I hope that over time that
he probably doesn't know. Like, why don't you?
He's back on. Who the fuck are you? He's got to go back digging through his emails.
Why don't you?
Okay, I know who you are now.
Why don't you tweet him tomorrow and ask him to be on the show? I bet you he won't remember, Dick. That's been 10 years plus.
Well, the great thing about the internet is that people always bring it back up. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah, let's get him on the show. Be fun.
Like Eric, Buddy, Booby, we need you on the show. Let's go.
We've had all your friends on the show. Why won't you come on the show?
Come on.
So,
do it.
Yeah. I mean, we have. It's been a long time. Anything else that was necessarily that shocking? I mean, Bob Bradley's firing. The one time we played a llama at left back, that was weird. Remember that?
Filippo probably hated us for that one.
What? Why would Filippo hate us that for playing Breck Shea at left back?
Oh, he's a big Breck Shea fan.
No, he's not.
He is. He posts how Breck Shea's the GOAT all the time.
All right.
Yeah. We're gonna receive some hate from Filippo for this.
No, that joke's running old for me. The Breck Shea thing. I mean, he does look like a llama. I get it, but or he did.
No, it's just our hate for Breck, our despise of Breck Shea's performances. I guess I don't know.
I don't hold any animosity to Breck Shea.
I mean, I don't know him personally by any means. I mean, sure.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, is it funny that he failed?
I mean, it's the equivalent of it's the equivalent of us hating on Justin Mapp for not succeeding as as a U.S. men's national team player.
Not really.
Okay, sure. I guess whatever.
No, Justin Mapp was serious about his career. Breck Shea wasn't. There's a difference.
Well, let's just say we had high hopes for Justin Mapp initially, and we had high hopes for Breck Shea, neither of which panned out.
You had high hopes for Breck Shea based on what?
No. We as a population, not just me. people in general held high hopes for Breck Shea.
I don't think we ever did.
I'm not saying you and I did. I'm saying we as a general we.
Why do you have to throw us in with the we?
The wee.
The wee, exactly.
Yeah.
The piss. I mean, people who held a high expectation for Breck Shea, like Jurgen Klinsmann, were just not paying attention. It was never there. It was never there. It was so obvious it was never there.
Not to the level they built it up to be, at least.
Who built it?
We.
Jurgen Klinsmann?
I'm sure he's part of the collective we.
Yeah. Jurgen got him to Europe where he fiddly fucked around. Made an ass of himself in the locker room. Anyhow, not to bring that up anymore. I mean, I wish the best for Mr. Lama. I hope
at this point it'd be like maybe he can work on a coaching career because he doesn't have much of a career left.
No, but I mean he's
got to be on the wrong side of 30, right?
Yeah, he was in what we used to call back in the day the black hole generation.
Yeah,
the players that are around 30, 31 right now who didn't pan out, and it was a lot of them. Did not pan out.
Yeah.
But he's still playing for Inter Miami, dude. He's 31 years old, so
he's not on the wrong side of 30, I guess, but he's getting close.
He's getting there. He's getting there.
Probably benefits him that he moved back to a wingback position.
Isn't it always weird though that he used his middle name, which is Brecken, and then he shorted it to Breck?
What's his first name then?
Dane.
Oh, okay.
His real name is Dane Brecken Shea. And that sounds almost foul. Dane Brecken Shea. Dane Brecken Shea.
Sounds like
Brecken. You Brecken this up.
You learn something new every day, guys.
All right. Until the next time on the Straight Red Card, make sure you like.
One question. I think we had two questions.
No, we did two.
Did we do two?
Yeah, we did do two, you drunk bastard.
How dare you? Not drunk.
Yeah, we
highly buzzed.
So am I, in a different way, but yes. So make sure you like, you subscribe, because it's really important at this point that you do these things over and over again. Share it with your dog.
Who also doos.
The stinky one in the corner. And then you got to hit the bell apparently, and you got to hit it a lot. You got to like bing, bang, bing, bell, bing, bang, because apparently people aren't getting notifications.
You gotta click that at an odd number, because if you do it an even number, you basically just unnotified yourself.
Just make sure you are still have the bell up, because people are complaining that even they ring the bell and they're still not getting notifications. And this is this weird thing we're going through with YouTube. And I know we're sounding like whiny bitches at this point, but thank you.
That's because we are.
Thank you for hanging in there with us through these hard times.
It's funny because you mentioned us being whiny bitches. There was
and
somebody
then I said hard.
Yeah. There was somebody who mentioned how like Jake from FIFA America did like a kind of a quote unquote Twitter awards, if you will.
Yeah.
And we got our funny content, and that's pride. I'll take it.
Yeah, man,
Somebody came out and said, like, half these people should get like a whining award because all they do is they whine and bicker about any loss or draw they get. So my response to him was, that award will go up nicely next to my Razzie and my Woody.
You wish you had a Woody. Speaking of that, it's 10:22. You don't have much time. So you got to, if you're going to use that Woody, you better get to bed. Evie, Brett is coming. Oh, I mean,
She's
coming
shaking her head right
upstairs.
now. She's like, no.
Coming upstairs.
Oh, shit. Fuck. Yeah. Maybe tomorrow.
Just don't make any more kids. 2's enough, Brett.
2's more than
Just
enough.
take it from me. 2 is enough.
I am done with it. I'm waiting for the last one to get done with diapers, all that stuff. Amazing.
Oh, Jesus.
Amazing.
Diapers. So horrible. All right. Well, it's better you than me. I've already been through it. All right. Until the next time on the Straight Right Card, seriously, this is the end of the show.
But wait a minute.